Welcome to Andy's Garage. I'm Andy Phillips. Today we're here in the garage. I'm going to be doing some work on my Jeep Wrangler TJ. Have some rust spots on it. One's not major, but getting there. The other ones are more minor. But in this video, we're just going to be taking care of all the rust issues on the body. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's take a look at what we're going to be dealing with. I have this spot here on the fender. You can see this one's getting a little rough. We'll get a close up here so you can see. But you'll notice there the rust has definitely gone down into there. It's kind of popping up there. What we're going to need to do here is need to remove all this, clean out all the rust, go down in there. I'm going to use some rust reform primer once we're done, and then we'll go ahead and paint it, clear coat it, all that. But first, we're going to remove this. We're going to use some rust dissolving gel that I have that we're going to put in there to eat that out. Then we're going to grind any remnants out, clean it real good. Then we'll have to take some body filler and raise it up, because if we look here, you'll see how once we're done cleaning it, it's going to have an indentation. So we need to raise that back up to level. And then I have the Chrysler touch-up paint for this particular Jeep right here, and then we'll do a clear coat on it. That's the first spot. Then if we work our way here, we have some surface rust right there, and then on the other side, same spot from water just settling. This is not as bad as what we saw on the fender. As you can see, even have a little bit there that needs to be cleaned out. But it's more surface stuff. So I think if we put that rust dissolving jelly on there, that should clean it, and then we'll sand off any remnants, prime it up real good, and this whole piece here is just going to be painted. You can see the clear coat starting to come off. So we're going to refinish this whole piece. But that's what we're going to be focusing on here for this project. Next thing, I'm going to show you what I'm going to be using to complete this, just in case you're dealing with a similar issue with your vehicle where you either have, as we saw here around the windshield, just the surface rust, or like on the fender where it's a little further gone at that point. Now, there are some situations where you can have it actually eating completely through the body. We're not going to have that in this video because fortunately I don't have that going on with this vehicle. But let me show you what I'm going to be using, and then we'll get started with it. Here's the items that I'm going to be using. First of all, I have the touch-up paint. Now, what you want to make sure is that you match it for your vehicle. So on the inside of the driver's side, either on the door or around the door frame as shown here, it'll list out the paint code. You want to make sure that you match that code. In this case here, I had to order it because they didn't have it at an automotive store. If you have a newer vehicle, because this vehicle's old, but if you have a newer vehicle, a lot of times if you can get it over the counter at like an Advance or AutoZone, car places like that. If not, you are going to have to order it, but you want to make sure that you get a perfect match. Next, what we have here is some Bondo body filler, since we are going to have to do some body filling. So you want to make sure if you have rust that's eaten down into it, that you get some body filler so you don't have that indentation. Next, we have this sandable primer, and this particular primer here does also put a rust barrier, which is what we're going to need. So you want to make sure that you apply the primer first before you do the body filler. If you don't, then you run the risk of the rust building up underneath, and then you're having another problem down the line. So as we get into it, I'll show you, but that's what we have here. And then I have just this protective clear coat. Now this is just a cheap, this one here by Duplicolor. Just something quick, so I'm just doing that little spot and we're going to blend it. If you're doing a bigger area, you may want to try a more professional one. They have some in the spray can where it also has the hardener in it, as shown here. I did a full product review for that. If you want to watch that video, I'll have the link across the top down in the description. That's what I would recommend for something bigger. But since we're just doing something small, we'll use that. And then I do have some sandpaper, because we're going to have to sand it down to clean off any rust in there. If the rust dissolving jelly doesn't work, you can either use that or sandpaper. I'm going to use both to make sure we fully get it. And then we will need a 1000 or 800 grit sandpaper on the top when we're done, just to smooth everything out. So we blend it, and then we'll have different grits for cleaning it out. But these are the items that we're going to need. When I do the final painting and clear coat, we're not just going to focus on this area. We're going to do a whole section of this fender. So you'll notice some little surface imperfections here, a little bit of clear coat peeling here, real small rust spot. All that'll be cleaned off. So this will all be redone, and we'll mask it and do that. But let's pop this piece off here and see what's underneath. You don't want to leave any, look at that. Look at this. You don't want to leave any rust under here, or you're going to run the risk of it coming back. So let's get all this off. Thing is, there we go. It's important that we get all of it. There we go. All right, it looks like it's rusted all the way through. We'll have to check on the inside of the fender. Coming in here through the wheel well, we're going to take a look up here and see what we're dealing with. All right, and there you can see where the screwdriver came through. It looks like there was a little seal or something there in that joint. That's what broke through, but definitely some rust forming there and coming through. We need to make sure that all gets cleared out and primed properly so it doesn't continue on this side as well once we get the top finished. Here's a close-up of what we're dealing with. All that needs to be cleared out. I'm going to vacuum all this out so we can get a clearer look of what's still there. Now we can get a better look on how bad this is. Look at all that. This is really bad, going all the way down. We're going to have to clear all that out. I'm going to finish cleaning all this out, and then we'll be back to see what it looks like before we apply the rust dissolving jelly on it. Everything has been cleared out. I cut all the body around it, and I'll show you why, because on the back side of this stuff, this is what we cut off. It's all rusted, and we wanted to take it all the way, and I'll show you one here. This was the last piece that we cut all the way out here. You can see where the rust was ending and then clearing up. So you want to make sure that you get any remnants off. Even though we are going to hit it with a rust reforming primer, which should stop it, you still want to clean it if you're doing this because you don't want to run the risk. So this is all cleared off. Next, I'm going to use this Rust-Oleum Rust Dissolver Jelly. We're going to apply it thick on here to eat through all of this before we grind any remnants down. Then we'll check underneath, make sure we got it all, and then we'll start applying the body filler onto it. But if you want to see a product review I did for this here, I also did one for Loctite. They make one as well. I'll have those links across the top, also down in the description if you want to see that more in depth. But let's apply that on here and then let this do its job. We'll apply it nice and thick, get it all underneath in here. And we'll let this sit about 20 minutes. If needed, we'll have to give a second coat, but that should be fine. We'll let it sit for 20 minutes and then rinse it off. It's been 20 minutes, so the next thing that I am going to do is we're going to rinse that jelly off of there. Let me put a bucket under here because we have to pour water. Want to rinse it real good. I'm going to get a close-up here, but it's looking really good. It ate a lot of the rust off. Still some surface rust, but we are going to sand it, or even if need be, I'll get a grinder. We'll grind because we're going to have to get all this prepped anyway. But it actually took a lot of it off. I dried a lot of that as well so we can get a better view, but you'll notice we're seeing some of the regular color of metal coming through as the rust was eaten away. Still need to do more cleaning on it, but it is looking better. Next, we're going to sand this down. We have some rough edges here where we cut it. I'm going to take a sander. We're going to sand this all down nice and smooth, and then once we get close enough, then we're going to start sanding this surface right here and get any of that surface rust off and see how it looks at that point so we can get ready to start doing the priming and then the body filler. Everything is sanded down nice and smooth right here. All that is gone. Even hit that little spot there that we showed at the beginning where we had a little bit of a scratch and a little bit of rust forming. Got that all removed as well. Just wipe this down. Get all that dust off. So the next thing that I am going to do is we're going to prep this surface here. So I'm going to get either some 60 or 80 grit sandpaper, or we'll get a Dremel and clean all this off real good. We'll go underneath, make sure that all looks good as well, and then we will prime this with that rust reforming primer, get all that covered up, and then once that dries, then we'll start applying the body filler in here, shape this nice, we'll sand it real good, and then prime it again, and then get ready to paint it and clear coat it. I cleaned all this out real good. We used a little grinding wheel, went over that, and then I took the wire brush, wire bristle brush, and just went over it again to get all the surface rust off of this thing. And then when I was using the grinder, I also went through any spots where the integrity was damaged. We cleaned those out as well. That's why we have these holes there. This is all nice and ready to go. So the next thing that we're going to do, we're going to mask this off so we can put that base coat, primer, and rust inhibitor on. We'll let that dry, and then we'll put a top coat of like a white primer, and then we can start, well, after we put the rust reformer primer, then we'll do the body filler, sand that down, and then we'll do the white top coat of primer, and then paint this fender. We're going to mask it off along here, this kind of this triangular piece. So I'm going to put the hood up on this thing so we can get everything and get it cleaned out. We'll mask it and then apply the primer and then the body filler. I raised the hood. You can see it's dirty in here. I should have probably washed that first before I brought it in, but need to clean all this out in here because what I'm going to do is mask it all along this edge and then right here and here, and then repaint this whole section. That way we can blend it better. So I'm going to clean this off. Need to remove this piece here so we have a full access. Then we'll mask it and then do the primer part, and so we can get ready for the body filler. Everything has been cleaned real good. We wiped it down, dried it. All that dirt is off. Did see a little bit of a rust spot back here, but that's all going to be sanded down before I paint it. So I'm going to go ahead and mask this off right now so we can start priming it. Wasn't able to get this off. The goal was to take that off, but unfortunately the nut underneath here is rusted on there, and if I try to put any more pressure, I think it's going to break this little mount right here. I don't want to get into that right now. So was able to get the rubber stopper off here. We just have to mask around this little piece, but it is what it is. So I'm going to mask it and then we'll be back. Everything has been masked off. We went along this edge here, and as I came near the little fender flares, I dipped down to meet where they connect to the fender, and then right along here, and then all the way to this piece. So the goal is to fan it out, so it's not going to be this straight line here. So we're going to fan it out. I just don't want it going beyond these points. Once we do the clear coat, then we can blend it in a little bit better, and then if need be, we can light sand it with 1000 grit sandpaper or even higher, and then polish it real good to blend it nice. So with this now off, we have this covered. I'm going to apply the rust reforming base primer right in this area. We'll let that dry so we can do the body filler. And you want to make sure you have the surface clear of any debris from any rust or sanding or anything. Wipe it down real good. I went over it also with some cleaner as well, just to take any kind of remnant of grease or any kind of moisture that might still be on the surface. Get it nice and prepped. That way the primer will adhere to it properly, because this is going to be our base. Get it really in here because this is going to inhibit any future rust. And we'll just fan it out like that. We'll let this dry real good, and then we'll be back to apply the body filler. The primer has fully dried. Everything is coated and sealed. What I didn't show in the last footage, because I did just the fanning out here, I noticed that I didn't get in these cracks in here, so I went around, went also underneath. We primed all of that, so all the rust has been sealed, or I should say the surfaces that had the rust have all been sealed off, so everything should be good. Next thing we're going to do is I'm going to mix up this body filler so we can start applying that. Normally I would put a support underneath, but since we have this support bar underneath the fender right here, and then we have also just very little bit of opening here, we should be fine just to apply it right there because it'll adhere to that. If you have a bigger gap, you're going to want to put some kind of a foundation underneath, whether you weld a piece of metal in there or maybe lay a layer of fiberglass with the mesh, just something that the body filler can properly set against. But since we're good with that, I'm going to mix this up and then we'll be back to start applying it. We'll take our body filler, apply it in here. And we'll have to give a second coat. This is going to be our base coat, just to really get it to fill in the cracks. And we need to build up that layer underneath. This is our base coat here, because I was trying to build up in that area. If you have an area like this or bigger, as I started to apply it, probably should have had something as a foundation, but it'll still work. It's just it's going to take a little bit of layering on this. So we're going to let this one dry about 20-30 minutes. Then we'll be back to apply another coat and we'll smooth it out a little bit better. And I actually am beefing it up a little bit higher because we're going to sand it down level with the fender when we're done, and it'll be nice and smooth. So we'll be back in about 20 to 30 minutes to apply the next coat of body filler. Everything is dry. I sanded it down lightly on top just by hand just to get any rough spots off. So now what we're going to be applying is the top coat over that base, get it as smooth as we can, and then when this dries, then we'll be back to sand this thing nice and smooth. We'll let that dry, and then we'll be back to do the final sanding on it. Everything is properly hardened, so we are ready to sand this down. After we sand it, we'll look for any imperfections, and if we need to, we'll put another coating on it and repeat it, let it dry, sand it again. Once we get it smooth, then we are ready to prime it down with the white primer, and then we'll let that dry before we apply the paint and clear coat. I just vacuumed all the dust off so we can see what's under here. It feels very smooth, really good, but you can see a couple little spots right here. Those are indentations. So I'm going to mix up just a small amount of body filler just to get those covered. And then we'll be back after it dries to sand it again and see how that turned out. Hopefully that's good. And then we can go ahead and prime this top of the fender. Just applied the little patch right there. We'll let that dry real good, and then we'll be back to sand it. And hopefully that takes care of it. But you can see the rest of it. It is nice and smooth, blended really nice. For sanding of this, we're just going to use some 400 grit sandpaper and just lightly go over the surface, blending it in. A sanding block is usually recommended, so that way you're not getting indentations from your fingers pushing down, but because this is just a very minor patch, I'm just doing it this way. And it's feeling very smooth. Oh yeah, feels really good. I'll get a close up. There it is. You can see it. Nice and flat. Nice and smooth. This turned out excellent. Sanded down nice and smooth. I also took 400 grit sandpaper and just scuffed the surface of the rest of the fender. Now we're just going to wipe it down from the little bit of dust from that. And then we'll let that dry. And then we can come in with the primer. You want to make sure that you clean it very well because you don't want any residue left over from the sanding, because any little bit of that dust or debris is going to cause problems for your finish once you apply it. So just making sure that we got everything covered here as we wipe it down. Start back here. You don't want to overdo it, just do a light coat. We'll come back and do another one. But you want to make sure everything is covered. This stuff dries pretty quick. So we're going to let it dry a little bit, and then we'll be back to do the second coat. Alrighty, it's been about a minute. Normally you want to wait about 1 to 2 minutes in between coats for this stuff. You can already see it's starting to dry, so apply our second coat. Want to do a sweeping motion, do not want to pile it on thick. Everything has been primed. You can see all along here. Looks really good. It's nice and smooth. All the damage that was right here has all been fixed. Can't wait to get the paint on it. So what I'm going to do now, we're going to let this dry properly, and then we'll be back once this is all dry to apply the first coat of the paint, and then we'll probably do a second coat and then the clear coat, and that should wrap this up, and we'll see how nice it'll look. And then we still have over here, still need to get the cowl off of here. So that'll be the next thing. As this is drying, we're going to remove the cowl off of this Jeep, and then we'll get that, all the rust on the sides removed, get that all prepped and primed as well, because we're going to paint that and clear coat that at the same time. Then we have this little area here. I got to see what I'm going to do with that, because I'm not going to redo all that, but we may just hit that with just some touch up and get the rust out of there. So with the cowl removed, I'm going to put some of the rust dissolver jelly on this end here, that end there. We'll let it do its thing. Then we'll be back to light sand it down, clean up any rust that doesn't come off with the jelly. Then we'll lightly scuff it down like we did on the fender, clean it real good, then we'll prime it. This one doesn't need any body work done. I am going to have to mask off these vents though, because I don't want to pop them off here on the inside. It's not screwed in or anything. I don't want to remove the adhesive or however it's attached. So we'll mask that off, and then we'll prime it, let it dry, and then we'll start applying the actual Chrysler paint on here and on the fender so we can clear coat everything. Now normally you want to clean off any loose rust or debris before you use this jelly, but in this case here, unlike on the fender, this is all just surface rust. So didn't have any fragments and stuff like we had to remove on the fender. I'm going to let this now sit for the 20 minutes or so, let it do its thing. We'll be back to rinse it off, see what's left, and then we'll remove whatever's left with either the grinder or some sandpaper, and then get everything prepped. As we can see here, this thing dissolved almost all the rust, because if you're dealing with surface rust, this stuff works really good. Let's check the other side. That's gone. This one's almost completely gone. These are gone. This one's almost completely gone. So I'm going to get some water. We're going to rinse it off, dry it out real good, and then we'll just take some sandpaper,
or some steel wool or some like a steel brush, wire brush, and clean off any remnants so that way we can prep this thing for priming it.
Just brought this in. I applied the black rust reforming base coat over everything once we got all the rust spots taken care of, and then we put the white top coat of primer like we did on the fender. So now I'm just going to let this dry properly, and then we'll be back to apply the final paint color onto the fender and then onto this cowl. We'll let that dry, probably put a second coat depending how that goes, and then we'll top it off with the clear coat, and then we'll be able to put everything back on and wrap up this project. All the primer has dried. We have the cowl piece here. What I did is I took 320 grit sandpaper, you can use 400, and just went gently over the surface of the primer to get it nice and smooth, because primer sometimes can go on, have a little bit of a texture to it. So we had that one done. I'm going to set that off to the side. But I'm going to take this, the touch-up paint here that we have from Chrysler. We're going to do one nice coat on this. While that's drying, we'll do the cowl. Then we'll come back to a second coat. That should be sufficient. Then we can pull off the masking, because what I'm going to do then, so we don't have that line, I'm going to take some very fine sandpaper and blend it, and then do a light dusting of spray around that border to blend it real good. And then we'll be able to come with the clear coat and wrap it up. So let's start painting this. Want to shake it really good, and then we're just going to kind of fan it and slightly overlapping. You don't want to put it too thick to where it puddles up or runs. You want to do just some light coats and just overlap it and make it nice and smooth. Looking very good. We're going to let it dry, and then we'll be back to do the second coat. Okay, we'll do the second coat now. Go along here, overlapping it. You want to hold it far enough back. Beautiful. We'll let this dry, and then we'll come back to look at it, see if we need another coat before we do clear. I put one more coat on. You can see it looks very good. We're letting it dry, and then I'm going to pull all the masking off so we can blend it better before we do the clear coat. I have the cowl over here. Show you what I did here. Gave it just its first top coat, and there it is, letting that dry. And then we'll be back to give it another coat and then see if that takes care of it before we do clear coat. Here's a shot from here. You can see how nice and smooth it looks as we come along. The paint is looking very good. Here's another shot of it from this angle. You can see how flat and smooth it is right here. You can see this edge right here. Obviously, this is the new paint that we applied. This is the old. This one's a little more of a yellowish tint because the clear coat is kind of stained. This one's going to be a little bit clearer. But what I'm going to do is take a 400 grit sandpaper, lightly sand that line off, and then we're going to mask a little further down. And I'm just going to do a little dusting of paint, just kind of blending it and fading it into this. We don't want that drastic line. We want it to be blended so it doesn't look as noticeable. I'm going to do that, and I'm also going to do the paint coat on the hood cowl so we can let those dry, and then in 24 hours we can do the clear coat and wrap this up. It's getting nice and smooth. You don't want to sand it too hard to where you're destroying the finish that you just did, but you obviously don't want that line. And normally I would paint the entire fender, but because of it being a difference in the colors, because of the clear coat, I didn't want one fender to look new and the rest of them have that kind of that stained yellowish color. So that's why I'm doing it this way, so I can blend it. So it'll still be the original here fading to the new where we did the work. Everything is smooth. Clean this off real good. We also went along the side, but we're going to wipe this off, and then I'm going to remask it where it needs to be. Obviously clean that, so if any of the dusting goes there, we don't want it capturing dirt. But we're going to clean all this up, get it remasked, and then we'll be back to start applying the final coat.
Just finished the second coat. You can see how it's blended very nicely.
Everything has been painted. We saw here the fender turned out excellent, blended it very nice. Once we take all of the plastic masking and stuff off, we'll be able to see it more clearly. But what we should have is the new paint blending into the old. That way it doesn't look drastic like the entire fender's been repainted and slightly doesn't match, because this vehicle here is a 2001, so it's 22 years old. So you have 22-year-old paint against new paint. So it's not going to be a perfect match. The new one's a little more vibrant, but the way that I did it, it's going to kind of blend it in so it's not as drastic. The hood cowl was also painted. That's drying as well. So what I'm going to do now, we're going to call it quits for today. Let it sit for 24 hours to properly gas out and dry, and then we'll be back tomorrow to apply the clear coat, and then we'll look at the whole thing before we wrap it up. Just doing a light sanding with 1500 grit wet sandpaper here just on the surface. Just taking any little flaws off from when we sprayed it, get it nice and smooth to apply the clear coat. Wiping everything off, we masked around this signal right here. Getting it ready, sand it down nice and smooth with the 1500. So we're ready to apply the clear coat on this and also on the hood cowl. So let's go ahead and apply that so we can let it dry and put everything back together. Clear coat has been applied. It's looking really good. I'm going to let it dry now 24 hours. We'll be back tomorrow to take a look at it again, see how it looks, and then hopefully be able to put the hood cowl back on. We'll put the vehicle back together. We'll do a comparison before and after, and then wrap up this video on fixing rust on your vehicle. It's been over 24 hours since we applied the clear coat, everything properly dried, and I put everything back together. Turned out awesome. However, this vehicle is a 2001, so you've got 22, 23 years on this paint. Even though this is the correct paint match, it's a lot more vibrant and has more life to it. So you're going to see that it's not a perfect match. On the passenger fender where I blended it, it turned out really good. But on this hood cowl, you can definitely see the difference in the color. This vehicle is going to be completely repainted anyway in the future. Not a priority right now. We have the Countach project, which is priority, and then I have a Dodge Neon SRT that's getting repainted, and then this will be third in line for those. But ultimately, this is going to get repainted anyway, so the colors that you're going to see soon on the cowl and on that fender, that's going to be on this whole vehicle. But for now, I just wanted to take care of the rust and the peeling clear coat that was on that cowl and get all that fixed. So let's get a close up and see how everything looks, then we'll wrap up the video.
Here's a shot of the fender. You can see the old paint down there, and I've kind of got it fading into the new, so it's not so drastic. But you can see how nice and smooth that is now. The rust is gone. It's all nice and clear coated. Here's another shot from this angle. And let's do a before and after. Here's a before shot. And now you can see how well this turned out. It looks beautiful. But you can see a little bit of a difference here with the old paint against it. This is how it used to look, but obviously 21, 22 years later, it's fading, but this is all going to be repainted in the future. It'll all be beautiful. Here's the hood cowl completely done. Remember, we had some rusting going on here. We had it all, the clear coat peeling right here in the middle. Here's a before shot. And then compared to now. All nice and finished here. You remember it was all peeling. Now you can see a little bit of the difference here against this other, the old paint, but still looks good. All right, well, this wraps up this video on how to fix rust on your car or truck or Jeep, whatever the case may be, your vehicle. A lot of times if you don't address that, it can get out of control. As we saw with that fender, it had eaten all the way down into it. So you want to make sure that you address those before it gets to that point. But if it does get to this point, we saw how we were able to successfully take care of it. Now, another thing to keep in mind is if you have clear coat that's starting to peel up, sometimes that can be the beginning of something. You want to nail that also and get that out of the way when it's still very small before it starts flaking up and spreading. If you want to see how to fix peeling clear coat, you can check out my video via the link above. Also have it down in the description where I show how to address it when it's still small. You can fix it, have it look beautiful instead of waiting for it to start peeling out of control and then you got to redo that whole body part of your vehicle. Or if it keeps going, then you wind up with possibly some rust. So that wraps up this video. I hope that this was informative for you, helped you out with any projects you're working on with your vehicle dealing with rust. Also, there's some good products for rust dissolvers, different jellies and stuff from Loctite, Rust-Oleum, things like that, that we did use earlier in the video, but I also have links to those down in the description as well. Please send me any questions and comments. I would love to hear from you. And as always, I appreciate all the support. So please like the video, subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you next time.